what do you want? Like, do you want to be running $100 million empire and be in meetings every day and be doing this for the next 10 years? Or do you want to have mornings where you can take calls or not take calls and be able to hang out with your kids and pick them up? Or, everybody wants different things in terms of what brings us fulfillment. And probably the worst feeling in the world is when you've built a very beautiful golden cage, because there's nothing more annoying than an unhappy rich person. Like, you should be happy. Right? And so, like, you built this beautiful golden cage, and now it's almost impossible for you to step out of it and to have any sense of time freedom or sanity freedom in your life. So that's really the very first thing is, what do you want? What do you want to build? What really brings you fulfillment? And how can we make sure that we have a true north here? So for your baby, for this company, it's a tool that's allowing you to get there.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast. Shawn and Lacey here. And just like each and every week, we are tackling some very interesting subject matter this week. We are discussing solutions for entrepreneurs who are, you start your business and, one of the biggest issues is that you don't know what you don't know.
Yes.
And you start to figure out,
even when you're running your business, you
don't
know.
Even if you're in business, you don't know what you don't know. Yeah. But then you start to figure out that you don't know certain things. And you realize, like, oh my gosh, I need a solution for this, or I don't know how to do this, or and what happens a lot of times, people get stuck. Like, it's just like then, and a lot of times people just end up having to give up. Or your competitor, they figure it out. They figure out the solution, and then they get way ahead of you. And then you end up suffering as a result of that.
Or you pick a less than right for you solution, right? That happens
too.
Or
you just make it up because you get the cheapest, or you think this is the best for you. You just Google it, and you're like, all right, this is the one I'm going to go with. And so we're going to talk to somebody whose business, this is so fascinating to me, is helping to match you with solutions for problems that you may be having inside of your business. So absolutely fascinating. Connected through a mutual connection with Scott Duffy, who's been on the podcast before and is always up to amazing things. And so I had a brief conversation with her, and I was like, man, we've got to get her on the podcast. So we're going to welcome in Ella Mae. And she's going to talk to us today about this new solution that she has come up with. Ella, welcome to the None of Your Business podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Here's where I like to start out, because everybody, even if and we're just as excited as you about your new business and what you're up to, but everybody has a journey, a story that leads up to them being where they are. That's the story that really feeds your knowledge base. It feeds your tenacity. It drives you. Tell our audience, how do we end up here talking with each other?
Yeah, it's so funny, because when you have this entrepreneurial bug and you go to start something, especially in the beginning, you put so much pressure on yourself around like the idea and what you're going to do. And you have no idea that's going to change like 18 times. And it really is not that big a deal. So I guess if we're going back, I was the EA for John Benson, who was one of the OG, very, very successful copywriters back in the day. And or currently, not back in the day, but currently. And I was his EA for 2 years. And like, guys, like, I didn't know what Zoom was when I started that job. Like, I should not have gotten that job. But I did, and I learned quick, and off we go, right? And I remember like 3 months into working for him, I was like, hey, what's this? Like, he's living in a $15,000 penthouse apartment, and he's created this cool business. And I'm like, what's this copy thing that you do? Like, I literally had no clue about the online world. And he was like, well, it's this. And he kind of showed me, and I was like, I think I could do that. And he was like, all right, cool. Like, here, go through this stuff and do these things and see if you like it. And If you do, awesome. And if not, whatever. So, I rewrote sales letters by hand like 10 times and did all, went through a bunch of stuff. And it was really cool because I started to learn copy from someone who was incredibly elite at it. He really mastered that skill. So through that 2 years of working for him, he's just a phenomenal person. To this day, top 3 best professional relationships in my life. And so after leaving that job, when I kicked off from that, I kicked off as a freelance copywriter. I was doing lots of sales pages, email sequences. I had great clients. Life was good, right? And it was around that time, I guess this was 2.5-ish years ago. It was around that time that I started to get really curious about social media. I'm like a marketer at heart, right? So I was seeing the ROI on influencer marketing and I was like, man, this isn't going anywhere. Like, this is really fascinating. So I started to do a lot of stuff with my Instagram and started to get it growing and get some brand deals. And with my background in copy and really knowing how to use words to sell, it picked up really quickly. And within like 4 months of kicking off on my own, I still had my copy clients going, but everybody was coming to me for social. They were like, how'd you do this with Instagram? And how do I get deals? And how do I get, et cetera? And I'm like, all right, I guess I should incorporate this into my business. So I started my company that I was doing before. To be honest, it was just under my name. It didn't really have a name, but it kind of went under the umbrella of InstaFame. And when I was doing that, I started off helping people just learn how to grow their Instagram following, how to get brand deals, how to monetize it, etc. Then I realized I really wasn't super pumped about working with people that didn't have a real passion. Like I didn't really want to work with people who just wanted to be popular. I wanted to work with people who had a passion for what they were doing. They had a clear way they could make money with it. So it was really trackable. So I started working with entrepreneurs and organizations that had been very successful, either pre-social media or without social media, and helping them take all of their copy, their content, their funnels, put it into social in a way that created a connection with their audience and in a way that monetized the channel. So when I was doing that, because I was honestly just, it was a good amount of luck and a good amount of seizing a few opportunities where I was working with fairly high up people and I built my network quite quickly early on as an entrepreneur. And as I was doing that, anyone who, your audience is fairly entrepreneurial, I'm sure. And for people who are familiar with marketing, social is like the tip top of the funnel. It's like the tip top, right? So if anything underneath isn't working, if the landing pages aren't converting, if emails aren't being opened because copy needs to be tweaked, whatever, I would always have to go in and look at the whole thing and what's happening to make sure that my stuff would work, right? And as I was looking at the whole thing and what was happening, there was often areas where gaps needed to be filled. And I got this roster basically of really good people who could come in and fill these gaps so that we would see better conversions in general. And the stuff we were doing with social, like the very front facing stuff, would resonate, right? So as I was doing that, that was a lot of fun. It built my network. It was a great skill set that I had, but I was sort of like, man, I have these strengths in the sense that I'm really good at connecting with hard to reach people. I seem to be really good at diagnosing problems and putting the right people in at the right places and all of it. I was like, I wonder if I could make an offer out of this. Like, I wonder if I could turn this into something. So I hired a coach of mine. I've hired him 3 times now. So I hired him again to help me build out a new product line because I was like, I know there's an offer here. I don't know what it is. The first call that we jumped on, we came up with this offer for the company 1 Degree within 45 minutes. And we were like, oh my God, this is so perfect. We have to run with it. And originally it was just supposed to be a product line like within my old company, but it picked up so much traction. We just created its own company for it. And so with 1 Degree, what we're doing is helping entrepreneurs who are scaling connect with vetted vendors who have solutions. So I'm doing a lot of the high level strategy, which I love because I think making connections without doing at least, an overall dive into the business and looking at what's going on and making sure that we're solving the real problem, not just the symptoms of the problem, or what we think the problem is. So I wanted to make sure that that piece was in place, because, it can be a little dangerous to not take that overview first. And then from there, making the right intros to vetted people who can do it, who can do what they say they can do, that are within budget, and creating an ongoing solution. So yeah, that's been the journey. It's been bananas. Entrepreneurship's insane. I don't know what loose screw we have in our head that makes us want to run companies, but it's not all that, but it's fun, but it's insane.
And I love it. What you created, you get to work with more insane people, tons of entrepreneurs.
Oh, we're all nuts. Don't let anybody fool you with their Instagram. We're all nuts.
We all got a little bit of crazy in us, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So let's unpack that a little bit more, because I think that, you're really onto something. We see that all the time. We go in and we're coaching clients, and they have part of their systems that may work really well, and then other parts that are extremely vulnerable, weak, and then the whole thing falls apart. The infrastructure is not there. And so what you do is you're really going in and you're really diagnosing not just an area that you are an expert in, but now looking at the whole big picture to make sure that the whole machine can run. So do you do like a questionnaire? Do you look under the hood? Do you tell us a little bit how that works when you're onboarding and looking at a client?
Yeah, it depends on the industry, obviously, and what we're doing. It's been everything from startups to established companies that are in the 50 million plus range, to companies that are in that horrible 2 to 3 million range. Because when you're at 3 million with the company, you need everything a $10 million company does, but you don't have the revenue there yet. In that rough place right there. So it depends on the company and what they're doing, who they're serving, and what they have in place already. But one thing I'm very careful about, because this is a mistake I made with my last business, is, people come to me when they want to grow, they want to scale, I should say. And there's when they want to scale, right? Big distinction. There's a really big difference between growth and scale. With my last company, the Achilles heel that I didn't know what I didn't know, that was set up to grow, not scale. If it was going to get bigger, I was going to have to keep killing myself and keep killing myself and keep killing myself. And we all get to the point where we're like, why the hell are we even doing this? I don't care if we triple revenue. I hate my life. And so that's one of the biggest things that I look at initially, is really for the CEO, for the founder, for the main person I'm working with. What do you want? Do you want to be running $100 million empire and be in meetings every day and be doing this for the next 10 years? Or do you want to have mornings where you can take calls or not take calls and be able to hang out with your kids and pick them up? Or, everybody wants different things in terms of what brings us fulfillment. And probably the worst feeling in the world is when you've built a very beautiful golden cage, because there's nothing more annoying than an unhappy rich person. You should be happy. And so you built this beautiful golden cage, and now it's almost impossible for you to step out of it and to have any sense of time freedom or sanity freedom in your life. So that's really the very first thing, is what do you want? What do you want to build? What really brings you fulfillment? And how can we make sure that we have a true north here? So for your baby, for this company, it's a tool that's allowing you to get there.
And what I talk about a lot is a lot of people, I think, erroneously say they're looking for freedom. They say, oh, I want time freedom, or I want financial freedom. Those are the most popular responses that I get. And I always tell people, but that's all. We live in technically you're in a free country. So, you could not do any of the stuff that you're doing. You're not being mandated to do any of this stuff. And on the financial side, within reason, most of the people that we are fortunate enough to work with, they're not starving. They're not eating noodles. And I tell them, well, what you're really tracking then are options. What you really want is you want to have options. You want to have the option to take off on a morning and do whatever you want to do, but you also want to have the option to work, which is nice, because a lot of times people enjoy their work, but they don't want to be, like you were saying, a slave to it, handcuffed to it. And so once people's minds are opened up to that, I mean, I think that's a great sort of analogy. Like, hey, you could be building your own jail cell, right? You could be just methodically enclosing yourself into this business. And so once people wake up to that, what are some of the sticking points that you find are the actual things that have them stuck to their own business?
Oh my God. The most common one that I'm seeing right now, this is hilarious. 50 to 60% of the time it's showing up is somebody will come to me, the ads aren't converting, or like whatever. We just, can you look at it for us? Can you make the right recommendation for what we should do and who we should plug in? It's team. It ends up being the real problem. Yeah, the ads aren't converting the way they could. We could fix it and triple, and make the ads better. We're still going to have this turnover problem. We're still going to have this culture problem. We're still going to have this customer service problem. And especially in today's climate where like we're virtual, but some aren't, and where are things, but team and culture. And, this is for companies who really want to build something. Kind of past the solopreneur mark, but team and culture is massive. And really being able to have, because leadership skills are very different than like leading a real team, running a company is very different than like the thing you're doing, right? Like the actual CEO role is very different than the deliverable that you started with as a solopreneur. So that's one of the biggest ones I'm seeing come up. And if anybody out there is a team and culture expert, you've built some cool stuff, you've helped companies like develop teams and do this, oh my God, reach out to me. Because I have like 3 right now. One is stupid expensive. Only a couple people have budgets for him. And the other 2 are busy because this is emerging as one of the most common themes. So team and culture, number 1. The second one would be effective storytelling. To be honest, and I think I saw an interview recently, or like a clip of an interview on TikTok with Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank, Mr. Wonderful guy. And he was saying how like, hey, if you would have asked me 10, 15 years ago, what the most valuable skill to go to school for or to have, I would have told you engineering or whatever. He's like, now I think it's storytelling, the ability to create a narrative that your audience can jump in on, and the ability to show that narrative in a video, in a dialogue, on a sales page, etc. So those are probably the 2 key skills, the 2 key things that we need help with that I see coming up consistently in companies.
I was gonna say, well, that's interesting because when I think like vetted vendors, the first thing that comes to mind for me is more like software systems, right? Like I'm thinking about what system would you need to implement here? But now, I mean, that has just expanded my thinking. You're talking about HR, hiring and firing, culture building. There's so much more when it comes to vetted vendors. So what other kinds of solutions or vendors do you have in your Rolodex that would be solutions for some entrepreneurs?
A few. It depends on how you want to launch. There's a few of them. One thing that is up and coming and a lot of people want to dive into right now, is especially people with events, is NFTs. Rightfully so. NFTs are really cool. Please don't quiz me on them. I am not the expert on them. But they're really cool in the sense of the little I know about it, in the sense of like, for example, let's say you guys have a mastermind, right? So if you were to create an NFT for your an NFT, let's say, and again, please talk to an expert. This is not advice. But as far as I know, if you were to create an NFT and somebody bought it, you could in that NFT wrap in a year at your mastermind. And anytime for like the original buyer, and anytime that NFT gets sold, if it's a piece of artwork, you could wrap into that contract, you get 5% of every resale. And it's all on the blockchain. It's really cool. So NFTs are a big one that we're seeing come up quite a bit. Events, and like, for example, I just yesterday connected, I have one guy that I work with. He's one of the he works at iHeartRadio. So I just connected him with the person who's putting together everything for Miami Art Week and Miami Music Festival, because iHeartMedia and iHeartRadio might come on as a sponsor. There's been business sales we've teed up. There's been, by just connecting the right people. There's been a few really cool things, and also just it can be as pragmatic as graphic designers, copywriters, right executive assistant. It can be as, you know, I like put in quotes simple, but as simple as that. And then sometimes it's a bit of a broader view, because a lot of the time, like I said, like when I'm going in there and just doing my due diligence to make sure I'm setting somebody up for success, we realize the model might need to be tweaked, or there's an offer tweak that needs to happen. There's a culture tweak. There's a whatever. And that can, I mean, it's kind of like when you solve the underlying foundation, then you're able to build a beautiful castle. But if you build a castle on the foundation of a house, the thing's going to collapse. And not because of lack of money. Sorry.
Right.
But this is so interesting. But everybody thinks cash flow is like the main thing. You can collapse not because of lack of money. It can be lack of structure. It can be lack of et cetera, which is really, for me, I just found fascinating, because especially in the early years of entrepreneurship, like you're so broke. Like you're so like most people that I know, anyways, and they had a period where like you're so broke, and it's like all we need is money, and then you realize you're like, oh wow, no, there's more to this. Like, what do I actually want to build?
And I love what you had said earlier, because that's a great point. You could collapse your business because you don't have the right team, you don't have the right culture, you don't have the right training, all of those things. It was funny because earlier today, it's not a name drop, as most people know we work with Jay Abraham, and he made a comment that I just thought was actually pretty funny, and I don't think he would mind us sharing this. Is we Lacey and I have the rights to 7 Everbowl franchises in the United States, and we were talking about this with Jay, and he was asking us about it, and he said, I've never been to Chipotle. But I did. I went to Chipotle the other day, and I went in and I didn't get the business model.
Right.
And so I looked at it, and he says it was confusing. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't know what the prices were. So I left, and I was cracking up. I was like, wait, you didn't get the business model? So you left. It's Chipotle, Jay. You stand in the line, right?
But
like,
I get
like
what
you weren't hungry.
So this was my revelation. This was earlier today before we talked to Ella. This sounds great, Ella. Here, and part of what I love about doing this podcast is it allows me to connect with our listeners, and I try to anticipate what they're saying, what they're thinking, what they're saying to themselves. And I want to make sure, because this is super cool. Like everybody needs this, like, man, this is great, but I don't want anybody to do a J. I don't want anybody to say, that sounds great, Ella, but I don't understand the business model. So obviously somehow you make money doing this. The people that are listening, they need this. How does it work? Somebody calls you up, they get in touch, and then how does the process, what's the business model, both from the client side, from the prospect side, and for you?
Yeah. Great question. So how it works is we have 4 different packages that we offer. So the first is sometimes it's just a 90-minute deep dive, all the way up to working with somebody for a year. Basically, if we're totally overhauling a sales department or whatever. So what's cool is I'm able to be fairly cost effective on the front end, because with how this model is set up, I have affiliate agreements set up with all of my vetted vendors, where when I send somebody over to them and they're happy and they continue on with a long, prosperous relationship, I get a cut, like the vendor, not from the client. The vendor gives me a percentage of that revenue ongoing. So that's what's really cool about it with the recurring income. And it does allow, to be honest, we only really put a price up front so that we're talking to serious people. That's, we're like, we have to charge something, but we really wanted to position this like if you are in a place where you're scaling your business, you're going to need some team. And so you have budget for that. We really want to position this like you'd be irresponsible not to jump on a call with us. And I always talk to everybody before anybody pays me and make sure that I can actually help. And if I can't help, I'll refer them out.
And then super important, how do people get in touch with you if they want to talk with you about this?
Yeah, for sure. So you can find me on social media. Will social links be down there?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. We'll
Over
put them in the show
notes.
notes for sure. But if you have any way that you want people to get in touch with you, we can drop that here.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't even know if we have a funnel set up. Anyways, but yeah, no, social is great.
Yeah, you just created the idea, right? 12 weeks ago, launched it. I mean, you've been doing this for so long, but actually put it into One Degree, the new company too. So for everybody out there, this is great because you're an expert at this. You've been doing it forever, and now you've made it into a company where people can hire you for this specific thing. I love it.
No, and we've really just been onboarding clients and getting feedback from it and just running with this. Like, I still need to do all the things that I do for other people. Like, we need to fix a website, we need to do everything. But yeah, probably the easiest way is DM me on Instagram. Instagram's probably the easiest for what we'll have linked below. But shoot me a DM on Instagram. I'll shoot you a calendar link, or we can jump on a quick call and see if it's a fit. But before we move on, can I tell you like a quick Jay Abraham story?
Absolutely. Especially
totally.
him walking out of Chipotle.
Okay. So, well, I've never hung out with him in person. This is a virtual Jay Abraham story. So when Clubhouse first launched back in December of 2020 or whatever it was, I was really active on Clubhouse, and through Clubhouse, I met David Deutsch, who's, another OG, one of the great copywriters, know? So David phones me one day and he's like, hey, Ella, I want to host this room with Jay Abraham, but Jay doesn't want to deal with any of the technical details. Can you like main mod this room for us? And can you? And I'm like, no, I'm busy. I'm like, of course, like no problem. Right. So we booked the day for this room, and I sort of realized, I'm like, well, of course I know, most people in the marketing realm know who Jay Abraham is. I'm like, of course I know who Jay Abraham is, but I honestly don't know what this guy does. Like, I don't know what I would refer him for. So I'm like, all right. So I spent like 2 hours digging into his YouTube content and digging into what I could find. I'm like, okay, cool. So he's like this marketing guru, and but one of the things I learned from him, and this has served me so well, is when there was this one video where he had this story of how when he was getting going, he would go to like the CD shop and figure out what was working there and take it over to this law firm. And he would go to like, etc. This has been something that has served me so well, because what I'll do on Clubhouse, like I'm still fairly active on Clubhouse. I like the social audio, but a lot of the time I'll jump into Silicon Valley startup rooms, real estate rooms. Real estate agents are incredible at relationships, listening to conversations of how well they think through their gifts and like giftology for their clients. Like, how do we get them something they're going to see every day, but it's personalized and it's within budget? Like, really fascinating. So that's something with Jay that I will always be grateful for, just from doing that, just from having to do that room with him, is learning to go to other sectors and bring it over to the entrepreneurship world, to different industries. So that was like a game changer.
It's funny that you say that, because he's been our coach now, I think for 4 years. We've been working with him. It's 4 years?
4 or 5.
Yeah, quite a while. And that's probably the biggest thing also that we've taken from him, that exact same concept. So we actually, all the stuff that we teach, sales, marketing, mindset strategies, we are chiropractors by profession and help a lot of service providers and chiropractors, but we look outside at all the other industries to see what they're doing and how it's working. And then we adopt it and adapt it for service providers that we serve and teach to. And that's been just phenomenal in helping them achieve other layers and levels of success because of that concept. So I love that you got that too, because that's what we have learned most from him as well.
Oh, that's so good to know. So you're saying I got 4 years of coaching for free?
You probably got 4 years. We did spend a lot of time diving in. No, he's taught us a lot more, but we've used that so much. Yeah.
Well, one last question as we come into our final descent here. There is another side of the coin. So we have, of course, all of your prospects, but then we have your vetted vendors. There might be people that are listening that are like, hey, I have a lot to offer to people, and most people don't know about what I'm doing. What's the process that a vendor goes through? Is it just like you have to have been lifelong friends with Ella, or how do you build out your bank of vetted vendors, and how would somebody get into that world with you?
Oh yeah, great question. I'm always looking for vendors. different personality types, different budget ranges. People will click with different people, right? And that's a big part of the connections, is just making sure that you guys are going to enjoy working together. So if you're great at what you do, or you've got a great company, whatever, whether you're solo, you got a company, whatever. Again, please feel free to reach out to me. Just shoot me a voice message on Instagram or type it out, whatever you prefer. Tell me what you do. You're interested in being a vendor. There is a vetting process we take everybody through if I haven't worked with you before or worked with you through a client before. And so we'll do that process. And then if everything's good, then I get to ping you with referrals. And again, when we send over referrals, it is very warm. Like I ping the vendor first and say, hey, I've got this person. Here's where they are. Do you think it's a good fit for an intro? If they tell me yes, I go to the person. I say, hey, I've got this, this company that I think would be perfect. Here's their budget. It's within here's what they're going to charge. It's within your budget. Here's where I think they'll be most valuable. Here's the things I think you should bring up with them. So the intros are incredibly warm.
I love that.
Yeah.
Vendors, how long or how big do they need to be, or how long do they need to be in business before they're sort of eligible for this?
Oh God. I mean, as long as you're good. I mean, I do want to see some proven work. Right. So we're not as much as I love helping people getting going, but we do need to see a few case studies and some proven work to be able to recommend you. But look, like I've seen people who put that together in 6 months. Like when it comes to copy, graphic design, et cetera, massive portfolios. They've just gone out there, found clients on Upwork, et cetera. And as long as I get, to be honest, like a lot of it is gut feeling, right? So if I get a good feeling about you, you're honest, I've seen what you've delivered before, it's good quality for what you're charging, and I know that you'd be a good fit for some people that we bring in, then I'm happy to take them on.
This is a fantastic idea. I love this because too, I think that part of it in the podcast is all about that. There's so many people who have an amazing service, but they're not very good at marketing. There might be, that might be why you're listening to the podcast. They're not very good at sales, but now you have a resource in Ella. Like if you're good at what you do and you're good at relationships, which is probably our biggest value.
You just need more infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you can connect with Ella. I think this is amazing. This is super good.
Idea.
I already know some people that I'm going to send to Ella that could be great vendors, but that are like a little gun shy. They're like, oh, and we'll have to work with them. Like you're good enough. You're big enough to play in that space.
You've done enough. I know a couple people too. So it's great.
Ella, thank you so much for being on the None of Your Business podcast with us.
Thank you for having me. This has been really fun.
Hey, everybody, please reach out to Ella. We'll put all of her social media in the show notes. Please connect with her. We say this every single week. We bring on amazing people, but it's not good enough to just listen to a podcast and be like, wow, that's so nice. Like, it's not nice.
Action.
You've got to do something. You've got to, you're like, oh, Ella's not going to answer me. Yes, she will. You've got to send a DM. You never know what could happen for your business, right? If you need help. Also, you might end up being a vetted vendor for her, and that could be massive for your business. So many great opportunities could come if you just take action. Ella, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the None of Your Business podcast. Make sure that you subscribe, leave us a review, tell your friends about us. We're off to a great start in 2022, but it's only going to get better. Don't forget, we'll be back again next week with a brand new edition of the None of Your Business podcast.